I recently heard about the last moments that Sam Kinison, when he was in the car accident and just before he died, before his soul left his body, his last words were, "Why? Why now?" Like, basically, I've got a long life to live, I don't want to go now. And I just kept on saying that over and over. And then all of a sudden, he said, with this sense of peace, he started saying, oh, okay. Like somebody on the other end, or somebody else, somebody was inviting him in a sense, and made him feel comfortable enough to just let go and leave his body. And he, if you know who Sam Kinison was, singing the song "Wild Thing," but in his his comedy acts, he many times would use Jesus and scripture to mock and make fun, and he would in a way it was very vulgar. He would talk about Jesus and curse and swear while he was talking about Jesus, but he was probably one of the most vulgar comedians. And he died in a car accident. That's how he left this world. But the reason I'm broadcasting this message is because if somebody like Sam Kinison could leave this world and make the people to believe that were around him as he was leaving this world that he was going into heaven, that he was going to be okay, that he was in an afterlife that was a good place. Can you imagine, people, how much power that Satan really has to deceive? Can you imagine? Now, without question, either the death angel or Lucifer himself welcomed Sam Kinison. You ever heard the term son of Sam? Sam is another name for Satan. And when Sam Kinison was leaving this world, he made, again, those people around him, made them to believe. Satan made them, the people around him, to believe that he was fine, that he's in a good place. He didn't act like he was horrified, like he was scared and he didn't want to die. And the way that they said it was that he had this peace that came over. And not only that, but the guy that was his closest friend there, that was watching him leave this world, he basically said that a peace filled his heart. Now, again, if you know how vulgar and how evil and how wicked Sam Kinison is, how much he blasphemed God in his comedy act throughout his life, he was a very vulgar individual, and his language was very vulgar, very filthy. You got to understand, people, that is a tremendous deception. And that is the false peace. I mean, that's where we see in the scripture where it says Satan comes as an angel of light. Now, probably Sam Kinison could have fought that. He could have fought death and he could have stayed alive. But Satan convinced Sam Kinison that he was going to a good place. Are you listening? How many people do you hear in these last days you're hearing that give testimony, near death experiences where they're, swept off into this place and that's supposed to be heaven? And I'm telling you folks, Satan has tremendous power to deceive. You listening to me? He deceived a third of the angels. A third of the angels. We have no idea how many angels that is because we don't know how many the full number of angels was when a third was deceived. And those are the demons that are on the earth today, those fallen angels, working with Satan right now in concert to set up his kingdom on this earth. And whether a fallen angel or Satan himself came as an angel of light to Sam Kinison, Sam Kinison just let go. And he went. He left his body and he left this world. But you and I, as believers, now they tried to say that Sam Kinison was a believer. But and I have a feeling his mother was probably a believer. And he was probably raised that way. But he certainly didn't live the life. In fact, he said to his best friend, he said to him one day, he said, "You need to get right with God." And he looked at Sam and he says, "You know what?" He says, "I am right with God. It's you that needs to get right with God." So I think that God was speaking to Sam Kinison, telling him, "You need to get right with me." And instead of accepting that voice speaking to him, he thought that voice was for him to say to his friend that was with him. But God was dealing with Sam Kinison, probably through the prayers of his mothers. I have to look it up to see if his mother was a Christian or not, to see if she was a believer. But most likely, she was praying for him. And God came to Sam Kinison and said, "You need to give your life to me. You need to get right with me." And instead of Sam Kinison receiving that for himself and getting right with God, he thought that he was supposed to say that. He says, "I don't know why I'm saying this." He said to his friend, he says, "But I think you need to get right with God." So I'm sharing this with you folks because there's a lot of people out there that are being deceived by a lot of different voices, by a false peace, a false gospel, false encounters with angels, all kinds of things going on today. How can you know without a shadow of a doubt that you're not being deceived in this hour? How can you know you're saved and that when you leave this world, you're going to be in heaven? How can you know? And without any question. And this is the question. Do you have pleasure in unrighteousness? Do you find pleasure in unrighteousness? And it doesn't matter what the unrighteousness is, do you find any pleasure in unrighteousness? Because if you do, you're in trouble. The scripture says, because they would not receive the love of the truth, that God sent them a strong delusion, that they would believe a lie and be damned. Those that have pleasure in unrighteousness. So if you're having pleasure in unrighteousness, and you know what unrighteousness is, nobody has to tell you. It's sin. In whatever form it is. If you're enjoying sin, if you're having pleasure in sin, you're in trouble. And there's no way you can be a Christian. There's no way you can be saved having pleasure in unrighteousness. There's no way. Folks, understand that God is holy and He's righteous. And through his blood, he cleanses us to be as righteous as he is. He gives us his own righteousness. First, he gives us imputed righteousness through faith, but then through sanctification, he gives to us imparted righteousness, where we receive his own divine nature. Don't be deceived, people. If Sam Kinison and those around him when he died thought that he was going to a good place, can you imagine how much power Satan has to deceive?